Hey everyone, it's Cael from Scud Style, just bringing you another The Raw Cael segment, which is unedited, unscripted, straight to the point based on what I know. Sorry I've been out of commission for a little while. I'm recovering from a shoulder surgery and a few other things have been going on, had a concussion. Everything's good, but I want to come back to making videos for you guys, and thanks so much to everyone who's subscribed recently. I really appreciate that, and I'll bring more content for that. So what I've been working with people a lot recently on is, as far as retention and sexual cultivation and NoFap, is how do you prevent a binge relapse cycle, right? Where you get on a good streak, and maybe you went on a good streak for a really long time, but then you just binge harder, and it ends up being harder and harder to pull yourself out of that and get a new streak going, and to do it in kind of a healthy, sustainable way. So one formula that I've come across a lot during the years, and I think is really applicable in this situation, is a Taoist formula where you take your age minus 7, and then you take that difference and you divide it by 4. And that number that results is the minimum number of days between ejaculation for you as a man to retain your vigor, your energetic and physical baseline, right? So for instance, if it's a 27-year-old, and 27 minus 7 is 20, divided by 4 is 5. So if they were to ejaculate once every 5 days, and they were in good health, and their diet was okay to keep replenishing those nutrients and everything else, and they were active, then they should, every 5 days, if they were to ejaculate once every 5 days, they should be able to maintain their health. A 47-year-old, 47 minus 7 would be 40, divided by 4. It would take them 10 days for them to recover from one ejaculation, pretty much. So if they did it once every 10 days, they would pretty much maintain on an even keel. So as this applies to a relapsing cycle or a NoFap streak, there's a lot of people that, let's say they get to 30 days, which is great accomplishment, right? But if they're not used to it and then they ejaculate, a lot of them can have a all or nothing mentality with NoFap, where it's like, oh man, I have 30 days, now I reset my counter, I'm back at 0, blah, blah, blah. If I'm at 0 anyway, I might as well just, take the next 3-4 days and just go nuts and binge, and then I can start over in a week or something. The problem with that is that you don't end up going back to day 0, and you really shouldn't consider yourself on day 0 after one ejaculation anyway, after going 30 days of retaining some essence and some energy and some vigor, right? So I like to use like energy units, right? So instead of days, we'll call one day equaling one energy unit. So if you've gone 30 days, you've accumulated 30 energy units, right? And by this formula, let's say that person who relapses is a 27-year-old. And so 27 minus 7, right, divided by 4. So they lose 5 energy units from an ejaculation. So instead of resetting their counter to 0 and feeling all defeated, they should knock it back down to 25, right? And then continue on from there. Because normally one ejaculation is plenty. If the body needs it, or if we're not used to retaining, or the energy builds up and we're unable to transmute it. And that's a much healthier place to start from, is that 25, because then you're at 25 and not at 0. The problem is what a lot of people do with my first example is then they'll spend 3 or 4 days, they'll ejaculate like 10 to 15 times. Let's say it's the extreme, which I've heard of, right? Someone in 3 days ejaculates 15 times on the end of a long streak. And then, so let's say that person was 27 again, and they're losing 5 days per for the 15. So they're losing 75 days. So they accumulated 30, and then they lost 75. So they're not starting at day 0 after it's all said and done. They're starting at negative 45 days, right? And let's just let that sink in for a second, because anyone who's gone through that understands how debilitating it is at the end of a binge relapse cycle, and how much harder it is to start than they anticipated. So that's why this really isn't good. We're pushing ourselves past the point of depletion, right? And your body is just so depleted. It's really much worse than just than relapsing once, right? Ejaculating once, and maybe you even did it in a loving situation with a partner, or some kind of connective way. You shouldn't reset your counter back to 0 as if you'd failed and all that 30 days was for nothing, right? It's not really a healthy psychological way to think about it, in my experience. And it's what I've noticed with my clients and people I've worked with. So it's really a good formula from the Taoists, and even one of the top names in Chinese medicine over the centuries, Sun Simiao, said that you could, not for this to be a loophole, but just to put it in perspective, said that you could achieve the benefits of semen retention while still ejaculating twice a month, right? So maybe it's not optimal, but you could still achieve it. So let's do it twice a month, and let's use like a 37-year-old this time, right? And then you don't have to end in 7 for this to work. It's just I'm trying to make the numbers a little bit easier to understand. So let's say a 37-year-old wanted to ejaculate twice a month. Maybe they're in a relationship. Maybe they're unable to do long streaks without doing long binges afterwards, so they want to build it up that way. So they go 2 weeks. It's 14 days, right? You're building up 14 days or 14 energy units, right? And then they ejaculate. A 37-year-old minus 7 is 30, divided by 4, right? That's 7.5 days. So every 14 days, if they ejaculate once, their energy units gets knocked down to 6.5, not to 0. And then they take that 6.5 forward. They wait another 2 weeks, right? And so they build up from 6.5 to 20.5. And then they ejaculate again, and then they're down to 13. But they're making forward progress, as opposed to, I go 14 days, and then I ejaculate a ton, and I'm in the huge negatives. And then I go a few more days, and then I ejaculate a ton, and I'm in the huge negatives, and I'm trapped in this cycle. So I hope that really helps you guys put it into perspective and play around with your own experience. If you are more robust and you don't notice a huge loss after 1 or 2 ejaculations, but almost everyone across the board, 1 ejaculation after a long period of time, if they've gone long enough and they're healthy enough and retained enough stuff, right, up to that point, then 1 ejaculation really doesn't deplete them like it used to, right? 1 ejaculation after 60 days or something is nothing like when you're doing it every day or you're doing it multiple times in a day. So play around with that, and don't let this all or nothing mentality cause this spiral of ineffective progress on your part, where you go 30 days and then you put yourself back 75. All right? Be patient with yourself, cut yourself some slack, and pay attention to how each one affects you. And if you have a positive way that you want to do, don't beat yourself up and be in guilt if you have a wet dream or if you want to ejaculate with your girlfriend or someone that's important to you. But it is much healthier to do something like that than obviously to masturbate or use porn or hook up with people you don't know just because it's allowed on NoFap. But anyway, feel free to reach out with me with any questions, Cael@scudstyle.com. Feel free to leave any comments here. I appreciate all you guys, commenting and sharing your experience, and let's make this a better place for everyone. And hope everyone's doing well, and I'll talk to you guys soon.